I'm Nicola Forshaw. I work for BACP, but I'm also a BACP member too, and I work in professional standards for BACP. So I'm representing professional standards today, and I'm going to introduce you to one of the projects that we're working on called the SCoPEd project. However, I would like to just start by saying a little bit about professional standards. So each of us who work in professional standards, we work on things like the ethical framework, the good practice in action resources, and we do things like competence development and specialist development and the curricular and competences frameworks around those. So a lot of work goes on behind the scenes, and I am also a counsellor practitioner myself. I have been for 12 years, worked for a long time in the NHS, and I've taught across colleges and universities too. And now I work for BACP and work in private practice. So it's really important to say that each of us that work in professional standards, we are all counsellors and practitioners as well, with the projects I've just talked to you about. And we all remain in practice, so we work part-time also. So let's think about the SCoPEd project. So why I'm here today, and I'm going to be very honest, I'm probably the most boring speaker you're going to have today, so I'm holding my hands up and being congruent about that. But this is a really important project of BACP's, and it's really important that we introduce this to you and you understand a little more about it. So we're here for approximately about 25 minutes, and the idea is that we're information sharing with you, so it's not necessarily an interactive session at this point. It will be me talking through slides, I'm afraid. So I want to introduce you to the SCoPEd project, describe the aims of the project, the work done so far, and also the potential timescales. We want you to understand how you can be involved in the SCoPEd process as it evolves. The second part of this is encouraging your involvement also, so you will have the opportunity for informal discussion and to ask questions today, and that will be during the connecting together aspect of the day. If we have time during this presentation, then hopefully there too. And my colleague Debbie Delves will be around for that. Unfortunately, I have to leave after giving this presentation. So Debbie will be there. Anything that can't be answered, it comes back to the SCoPEd team, and we bring it back to you once the webcast is available. We'll feedback on your questions. And so essentially what we're thinking about is we want to keep you involved as SCoPEd evolves, and there is also a designated SCoPEd email address which I'll leave with you that's at the end of the presentation, and we respond individually as well to any queries around SCoPEd. So what I might do today, because I feel a bit lonely up here, is I might ask you sometimes just to put your hands up. I won't target anybody individually, and I won't be asking you to speak up unless you particularly want to. But could I have a show of hands for anyone who's already heard about SCoPEd? Okay, thank you. So only a couple of people in the room, thank you. And where have you heard it? Does anybody want to volunteer where you've heard about it? No? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you anyway, for those of you who haven't. Good job I came prepared, isn't it? There has been a website article on the new shiny BACP website. And also Andrew Reeves has talked about it in his column in Therapy Today, in the May edition. And also there have been some letters submitted to Therapy Today, which we've responded to as well, BACP have responded to. So it does feel important then, given that a lot of you have not heard about SCoPEd, that we introduce it to you and give you some more positioning around it. Okay, so what is SCoPEd? We call it SCoPEd, some people call it SCoPEd, so it's tomato, but I'll refer to it as SCoPEd as I go through the presentation. It essentially stands for the Scope of Practice and Education for the Counselling and Psychotherapy Professions. It's a specific project that's arisen from the collaboration of counselling and psychotherapy professions, the CCPP, and the CCPP have been looking at core practitioner training. Those that are involved in the CCPP are BPC, there's a lot of letters here, BPC, UKCP and BACP. So essentially this is really groundbreaking, because what is happening through SCoPEd is that BACP is working in an unprecedented collaboration with UKCP and BPC. And those of you who are as old as I am will know that traditionally we have not had the closest relationship with those other bodies, but I can speak with experience. I'm part of the technical group. We are working very closely together now and working in collaboration. So it really is quite exciting times for us. What the SCoPEd work is aiming to do, so what the collaboration is looking at, is systematically mapping the existing competencies, standards, training and practice requirements within counselling and psychotherapy. And the view is we're going to produce a shared competence framework between the three bodies. That's what we're aiming to do. So why is this necessary? Why is this happening now? Why this collaboration when traditionally we haven't been so close and have even been at war with one another at times around counselling and psychotherapy? As we know, everybody in this room, that counselling and psychotherapy is largely self-regulated by each professional body, who in turn are regulated by the Professional Standards Authority, or the PSA. And the PSA runs the accredited register scheme. So those of you who are registered members, you'll be accredited, you'll be a member through the register scheme from the PSA. The role of the PSA is to set minimum standards via their accredited registers programme for professional bodies, and the focus is on, and quite rightly so, is on public protection. However, the registers themselves across bodies and different counselling and psychotherapy bodies do not have their own distinct standards of training or requirements for practice. And there's no agreed common entry or training requirements to enter the field. So those of us who all work as counsellors or psychotherapists, we'll be aware that people around us may have done different levels of training to us, different types of training for different lengths of time, for instance. And there's no kind of commonality across where do you enter the profession, each of the professions. So what we're recognising is this can cause confusion for the public, for clients, patients, employers and commissioners in terms of knowing what to expect when employing a counsellor or psychotherapist. So it can impact our employment opportunities. The reason SCoPEd is happening now, because the field has been in this way forever, is the fact that BACP, BPC and UKCP are unanimous in collaborating to try and come together and set standards, develop standards for the counselling and psychotherapy professions. What is really important is this unity, which hasn't happened before, and this collaboration will help if statutory regulation of the healthcare professions becomes mandatory, which is a possibility. So again, when we think about regulation, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. I'm going to touch upon it briefly during this presentation. I'm going to ask for another show of hands. Who in this room would consider themselves to be unqualified? Okay. I'm not going to ask why you think that. Okay. Okay. There was a question put to Parliament in June asking what plans there are to protect people experiencing mental health problems from accessing treatment from unqualified counsellors and psychotherapists, including by requiring statutory regulation. Let's think about that statement for the moment. What that statement potentially is referring to is the fact that unregulated professions means unqualified. How many of you in this room would agree with that? I don't agree with it. Quite offended by that. You know, the time, the money that we spend developing as professionals, the work that we do, it really matters. Counselling changes lives. We use our time, our resources, and largely we use ourselves when we're developing and continuing to practice. So it really is quite frightening that we could be considered as unqualified because we're not regulated. And one of the things I really want to emphasise about the SCoPEd project is it's not seeking regulation. That is not what SCoPEd is about. What SCoPEd is doing is trying to prepare the landscape to enable us to respond in an informed way should statutory regulation appear on the agenda again. The other thing that statement is alluding to, of course, is the fact that there are people out there, and there'll be nobody here in this room that's done this, who's gone out and done a 10-week introduction to counselling course, set themselves up in private practice, and there's nothing to stop them from doing that. So it is referring to that, but predominantly, and it was also stated in the Green Paper for children and young people, looking at children and young people's mental health and responding to that. Again, this phrase, unqualified counsellors and psychotherapists, was used. And it's quite offensive when we think about the work that we do. So if we think about regulation, this is the position as it currently stands. This is all we know. So the 5-year forward view for mental health, which was published in February 2016, recommends that the Department of Health should consider how to introduce the regulation of psychological therapy, which are not currently inspected unless they're provided within secondary mental health services. And the department is working with the CQC. I've worked in secondary mental health services. I've been part of CQC, and I don't welcome the prospect of CQC being our regulator. However, that's what's being discussed at the moment. And they are considering options for deciding the right level of regulatory oversight for professional groups following on from Promoting Professionalism, which was a consultation which closed in January 2018. So there will be a response around regulation in due course, whatever that means. That's political speak, isn't it? It may never come, might come next week, we don't know. So what I really want to reiterate around that is that SCoPEd is not about regulation. It will help us to respond to regulation should it occur. And what it's aiming to achieve is to arrive at an agreed understanding of the generic competencies for core training in counselling and psychotherapy and produce a shared competence framework between the three bodies. It will provide clearer pathways for trainees entering the professions, and it is a genuine collaboration between BACP, BPC and UKCP. I'm going to test you on that later if we remember all of these letters. But it's held within a vision that a clear, evidence-based map of shared generic competencies will offer information to clients, commissioners, and will increase opportunities for our members. And it will, the framework itself, the competence framework, will inform this position of us being qualified. This is what we do. It's proven this is what we do. These are our competencies as professionals, as counselling and psychotherapy professionals, which we are. The competencies will be broad and generic, so the work that's done so far, I'm going to introduce you to that. I'm going to have to ask you to stay awake for it because I'm going to talk you through an evidence-based process. But the competencies that we're looking at the moment, they're broad and generic, and they recognise different entry routes into the professions. So it's not necessarily a degree level. We're looking at every level and every way of entering our professions, to allow different groups to interpret them with their own theoretical approach, philosophy and training traditions. So when the competence framework is produced and shared with the three bodies, it's not modality specific. It's about what we do regardless of which modality we use, so we're not getting into any of that discussion. And what will it mean once it's ready? What will it mean? The philosophy is not about creating anything new. It's not imposing or creating new standards. It is simply mapping the existing competencies and reviewing the latest literature to produce a competence framework that is shared. So essentially, what we've been looking at, and I've personally been doing this, and I can tell you it's been a lot of work, every competence framework that is published in the UK and Europe is involved, has been brought into this project, has been looked at. So it's not creating anything new, it's bringing together what's already out there. The framework, once it's ready, is aimed to be indicative and informative. It's not about imposing new standards or creating new standards. It's about evidencing what we do and why we do it well. Another myth is that the competence framework will become a shared curriculum. Now, if we think about that for a moment, that would be impossible. So this isn't about creating curricula, it's about competence framework. So anyone who's running courses, counselling or psychotherapy courses, as long as they evidence that they are meeting these competencies, they're teaching them, they can develop their own curriculum whichever way they want. So it's about keeping creativity, it's about keeping different training traditions and different philosophies alive and embracing that. The core competencies, as I've said, they won't be modality specific, they are generic competencies. And once it's ready, it will apply to future training entry for anyone wanting to train as a counsellor or psychotherapist and register with the three bodies. And also, it will be available for other bodies to adopt should they choose to. So although the three bodies are the ones collaborating to get this work done, it's not exclusive. It is going to be available for anybody to use should they choose to. So just to give you a little insight into who's involved in SCoPEd. So this has come from the top level of each of the organisations. So the steering group is formed of the chief execs of all three organisations, and then there's a technical group. So the steering group steer the technical group. We have to report to them. The technical group, and this is really important, we're all employees of, so I'm on the technical group, we're all employees of UKCP, BPC or BACP, and we're all practitioners and educators in the field, and current practitioners and educators in the field. And then this is very important because this is the bit that offers rigour and challenge to what we're doing. So the expert reference group, or what we'll call the ERG, they are invited representatives, so they're autonomous to us, they're independent of the three bodies, but they've been nominated by each of the three bodies. So there are 6 experts who are scrutinising the work that we're doing and challenging the work that we're doing. And that work is ongoing at the moment. And the ERG are what we might call experts in the field, so academics and such. And lastly, the ERG is chaired by an independent chair, so somebody who's independent of all the three bodies, and that's Professor Lemmer, and she's from UCL. And we have an independent information analyst who's helping us with the literature and producing, answering some of the questions that are arising from the literature. So, what have we done so far with this work? We've identified a clear evidence-based process, and it's based upon Roth-and-Pilling methodology. Anybody familiar with Roth-and-Pilling? They've done the UCL competencies, so we're using that methodology, and UCL competencies have been looked at as part of the work. The technical group has already completed the mapping of the existing competencies and standards and practice and training requirements, and we've produced a first draft of competencies for counselling and psychotherapy. What is happening at the moment is that first draft is being reviewed by the ERG, so they're scrutinising that work and challenging and looking for gaps and questions. With these gaps and questions and challenges that have arisen, we have an independent information analyst who then goes out to try and seek evidence within the existing literature to answer those questions. And we're currently in that process now, so this is not completed yet, but we wanted to let you know about it. So our next steps with SCoPEd are the second draft framework. So once the ERG have finished their scrutiny and we've responded to the scrutiny, there will be a second draft produced around about October this year. What will happen at this point is there will be a joint targeted stakeholder consultation and a member engagement process which will start around about November this year, and we want you all to be involved. That's why we're going to be each making connections event. So there's another 3 for us to attend up until next year, and we'll be bringing SCoPEd to every one of those. Based upon the findings of the consultation, so once that consultation is complete, we're looking at early next year, the ERG will then be responsible for producing the third and hopefully final framework for sign-off. So what we're hoping for is this framework will be ready around about spring, summer next year. Why do we need a scope of practice? What is it? So what we recognise at BACP is the counselling professions contain several disciplines, including counselling, psychotherapy, coaching, counselling skills. And there has been debate around the differences and similarities between counselling and psychotherapy. And BACP has previously taken the position based on similarity, that there's no difference between counselling and psychotherapy. Within the context of SCoPEd, the scope of practice means mapping and defining the similarities and differences between counselling and psychotherapy based on the existing evidence-based competencies and latest research literature to arrive at this shared competence framework. And the first iteration is showing that there is difference between counselling and psychotherapy, so that is something that may come out of this project and maybe something that we change position on. However, for BACP, this is also important for those who are already qualified. The scope of practice also refers to, within BACP, not shared across the other organisations, defining specialist or discrete areas of practice based on competences, so such as supervision competences, can't even say it, competences, coaching, counselling skills, children and young people, etc. Why are we doing this? Why do we think our members will benefit? How might we benefit from doing this work? It's a large piece of work. And the vision is, and it's a shared vision, that this evidence-based framework, competencies, it will demonstrate transparency across the counselling and psychotherapy professions. It will enable commissioners, individual clients, organisations, employers, etc., to be better informed about what they can expect from a qualified counselling and psychotherapy professional. This, we hope, will enhance employment and paid employment opportunities for this very valuable workforce that we have. And also, as I've stated before, collaborating upon this framework may help us to respond to the potential challenge of statutory regulation if that appears. Okay. How might we be impacted as existing members? So I'm a member, we're all members in here. So we think the shared framework will be finalised around spring, summer next year. At this point, BACP will need to respond to the challenge of embedding the framework into their existing policies, procedures and structures within BACP. And the vision is that the shared framework will apply to all those entering training routes into the professions and seeking registration with any of the 3 bodies. But in time, existing members may also benchmark themselves against the criteria and the framework as part of ongoing registration requirements. So in the future, the more medium to long-term future, that may be where we end up. BACP is fully supportive of all members because the competencies that are out there will be competencies we're all doing. There is nothing new that we're finding in this literature or in this competence framework that everyone in this room won't be doing in their day-to-day practice, wherever you practice. So it's just, when we're talking about SCoPEd, we want to be reassuring about it, that the fact there's nothing new being created here, there's nothing new, no new hoops to jump through, but simply we've got a benchmark. We have something to evidence that what we do well as professionals. And this isn't immediate. Once the framework is produced, it will be a lot of work to then implement that into existing structures. So we're talking a long-term implementation plan. We're talking years, not months, just to put it into context. So let's think about your involvement. How can you be involved in this? Because this is changing. It's changing the landscape. It's fully informing the landscape of counselling and psychotherapy. So the challenge is consultation and engagement with members when this is such unprecedented work. The amount of members, if we add them all up, we're talking nearly 90,000 members to consult with. So we've got an organisational consultation. If we think about the ERG for a moment and the scrutiny that they're adding to this process, they need a peer review of the second iteration of the framework. So that's part of the consultation, speaking with organisations and organisational members, potential employers, commissioners, other interested parties such as the Royal College of Psychiatrists, sending this out there and saying this is what we're doing, this is how we're evidencing that we do our work well, we're a qualified workforce. So they have that aspect too, but we as organisations want to be with our members, we want our members' input, we want to communicate with you and keep in touch with you and allow you to have some input to it. So we're currently looking at how we'll be doing that through the consultation process. So we ask you to keep your eye out for SCoPEd information. We do have, as I mentioned at the beginning, we do have an email inbox. It actually comes to me as part of the SCoPEd team, and we will respond to any individual queries if people feel they can't ask questions in an environment such as this. And the questions may come up as you learn more about the SCoPEd project and its implications. So please do feel free to use that. We do respond. Some answers we don't have because this is an emerging process. So we may not have the answers and we'll be very transparent about that, but we will come back with them. So please do ask the questions. Please keep communicating with us and look out for the consultation which is due towards the end of the year, which you can also be part of. We will also, as part of staying connected, so you'll get the webcast of today, we will also, any questions and themes and queries that arise, we will respond to them as part of that process as well. So we want to keep keeping you informed. Okay. So just to come towards the end of my part of the presentation, just thinking about what the future might look like, the potential future. It's a bit like a tree. So our trunk, we can enter counselling and psychotherapy professions via an academic route, via vocational training. There's not going to be any changes to that. There'll be a home and a place for everyone, no matter which way they want to come into the field. And within the trunk, within the core of that, we've got the ethical framework at the core of everything that we do. That will inform everything. It will be in the competence framework, and evidence from there is in the frameworks. We've got the core competencies, the shared core competencies for counselling and psychotherapy. And then it doesn't end there. There's always the opportunities. That's part of what drives me and drew me to this profession or these professions, is the fact that we never stop learning. We're always learning. There's always routes to learn, to become more specialist in areas. We learn from our clients. And so it's hoped that there is a continual learning process for those who want it, and certainly won't be enforced on anybody. So I'll best answer that as best I can. So for other bodies, such as the NCS, the National Counselling Society, those who aren't aware of who they are, they're not part of this initial work. And that's because, as I explained at the beginning, there was already the collaboration which got scoped off the ground between UKCP and BPC. However, as part of the consultation process, they will be invited to consult on the framework when it's produced. When the framework is actually completed, any professional body can use it if they choose to, so they will have some say and input into it. But to try, if we're going to be realistic, to try and get every professional body together to do this work, it probably couldn't happen. So this is just starting it off. It may eventually become something that we have further and further and further collaboration on. potential with statutory regulation, which is different. So this is kind of a bit of trying to do a bit of self-regulation, try to evidence the work that we do, that we're valuable, that what we do is, that we're competent in what we do. And that we can't predict what might happen, and I understand where that question's coming from. However, what I do want to say is the competence framework, there's nothing new in there. So if you are now a competent counsellor, you will be evidencing that you can work competently against this framework. There's nothing new, this isn't generating something new. And in some ways that's what the collaboration is about. It's about saying, you know, we're working together, we have more, if we're unified in the professions, the counselling psychotherapy professions, we're able to evidence what we do, and we can have more impact on employers, commissioners, etc., than trying to do that independently. So perhaps it may be, the counter argument is that a student will have more of a voice, and maybe more protection. But equally, opposing views are also valid. So it's not about being dogmatic, it's not about imposing standards. It's about offering a framework where we can say what we do works and works well, and that we're competent and professional and qualified. But thank you for your questions. The three bodies will maintain their own identity and their own ethics. There's quite a lot of unity around what an ethical framework or code of conduct is. So what isn't on the horizon, as far as I'm aware, and certainly not part of the SCoPEd project, is that we will be implementing other professional bodies' ethical frameworks. We will keep our own ethical framework. And the ethical framework, we must remember, is a live thing. It's always evolving. It will always be reviewed and revised. And that's something that was a surprise to me when I joined BACP as an employee as opposed to being a member, was seeing the fact that the ethical framework is it's at the heart of everything and is constantly being reviewed. So we can look forward to a revised version of the ethical framework, but what we won't be doing is incorporating the other two bodies' ethical frameworks into our own. Thank you for the question. Sorry.
I just kind of want to comment really on, I suppose, from what you were saying around how can I put it kind of in line with the ethical framework, and for me, the word that keeps coming to my mind is this word collaboration. And I spoke about the SCoPEd project at a conference a couple of months ago, in which on the panel were members of BACP, UKCP, BPC, and other professional bodies. And I think we cannot minimise the value and the importance of the collaboration that we have so far. Because to get those professional bodies round a table, coming from a history in which the profession is fractured, that collaboration, as Nicola's saying, is a pinnacle but a very important starting point as we move forward, in which the profession as a whole is evolving. And evolving, in my experience, at quite a fast pace, of which we then need a framework of standards that's going to reflect the work that we do. Go back to Nicola's point around who of us in this room feel that we are qualified. Now, I feel, and again, not as a governor, but as a member, I feel supported by the fact that my qualifications and the training that I've done mean something, stand for something. And I think that would go for, I hope, would go for any one of us in this room, that all the investment that we put into our training is then reflected professionally out there, outside of the counselling community, so that it affords us opportunities for work, employment, for us to do the job we do and are taken seriously as professionals. It goes back, in my mind, it links to the lady's point over there around the ethical framework, that this is all about an evolving profession. Because we're not under statutory regulation, I think it's really important that we kind of do our own housekeeping, that we take the lead on establishing a profession that without these frameworks would be a free-for-all. And I think there's something about why not hold ourselves to a gold standard? Would each of us not want to be out there working under a title, whether it be counsellor, psychotherapist, counselling psychologist, but have value and meaning and ethics and standards to that title? So I think the collaboration, the SCoPEd project, which is fundamental to this, alongside all the other work that BACP are doing, particularly around the ethical framework, I think is part of that larger picture. So for me as a member, I'm kind of in that respect very passionate about this project, because I think it actually allows us to put some kind of template down. It allows us to establish the benchmark for each and every one of us. And as Nicola was saying, it's not that we are doing it so that we are elevating the benchmark, but rather we are just cementing it for where we already are. So I hope that helps with some of the questions around that.
Okay, thank you. We're not seeking statutory regulation. I really want that message to go out there. That's not what this is about. However, it will help us to respond to that, should that arise, and that's out of anybody's control. That, it's being debated at the moment, where is it going to come from? But it helps us to respond to that, should it appear. Thank you. I am going to have to thank you for that question. Thank you very much, all of you, for your attention today. I know it's not the most exciting subject to go into detail with you, but it is a very exciting project. It's very exciting for our professions. Thank you for your time. The SCoPEd inbox is there, and please do use it if you have any questions, and Debbie will be happy to speak with you later on. And enjoy the rest of your day, more importantly. Thank you.